A contributor that I've brought to the show, who's a friend of mine, Phillip Ullmann. I want to just tell you a little bit about him first, although some of you will be familiar with him. He made a phenomenally successful business, contracting in lots of the people who worked in warehouses and security, became probably one of Britain's most successful and wealthiest businessmen. However, he then decided that he felt that that whole element of the economy was morally wrong, and probably is the person who willfully lost more money than anybody else in British business history. Anyway, Philip is now a thought leader who is campaigning for a more sensible approach to economics.
Even though he's skint.
Can I tell you something? He's got less money than before. He ain't skint. He's not skint. But look, they want to call him the money man. He wants to call himself the Manna man. We won't explain why, but Philip, first of all, manna from heaven. So, okay, Philip, we want to bring you on to talk about money, and people think it's boring and people think it's irrelevant, but actually there's things that you've said that have knocked my socks off. Right, so first, the question I want to ask you is this. We've had an announcement from the Bank of England that the interest rates will stay at 5.25%. Right, why is that a problem?
It's a problem because we think about the two big sets of people influence. You've got the people with mortgages, your audience, and most of them will have a fixed rate mortgage, which might have been at 2% on the last fix, and they're coming to the end of their 5 years. What's going to happen to that fix for the next 5 year? Double? So it's going to go to.
But also, people go, it's not risen at all. It's not zero. It means it's constantly going up 5.25%, which people don't.
It was 2% when interest rates were naught. Now interest rates.
Is that ever happening? It's never happening again, is it? The 2 and 1%.
No, that's gone.
That's gone, isn't it?
So hang on a second, right? So there are millions of people now on a fixed rate mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. Say they're paying 500 quid, 1,000 a month, whatever it is. How many of these people, do we have any idea, are going to have a double mortgage, much higher than that? People are going to have real financial problems here.
They have got real financial problems, and the point is, it's not happening to everybody at the same time because it's almost phased over 5 years. So it's spread out, so the impact is not immediate because of the lag. But over the end of 5 years, everyone's going to have it because that increase from 0.5% to 5.25%.
So is that a property market crash?
That is a systemic collapse of the whole system because we've talked about private householders. What about businesses? Same problem. They have what they call swaps. So it's not a fixed rate mortgage. It's a swap. But it's the same thing. Forget about their jargon. It's the same thing. And therefore they assumed they were going to be able to finance it, whatever, 1 or 2%, and they're now having to pay the double. So effectively, the banks are in trouble. Very simply because the money they lend, whether it's to householders for mortgages or it's to businesses, is
but why aren't people panicking?
Because it's all been kicked into the long grass because they know that people can't pay it. What they're doing is they're what we call rolling it over. So they don't want to cause a systemic collapse. They say, okay, we'll pretend it's not really happening. We'll roll over your mortgage, the interest you should be paying into the mortgage, or we'll do a swap which will enable you to roll. And it's deferring the problem. The problem is not being dealt with.
Yeah, but when's Armageddon then?
Is that why Sunak called the election early?
No, look, I don't know. The answer is, to call it precisely, one doesn't know. But what one does know is it is in trouble. The system is collapsing and will collapse imminently. I can't tell you, is it a year or two?
So Pete, let me ask you this. So, Philip sits here, major business leader. He's also an accountant for his sins. But look, it seems to me pretty obvious what he's talking about, which is this. If you are paying 1,000 quid a month in a mortgage and then the fixed rate ends and the interest rate's doubled, you now have to pay $2,000. Now, I don't know how many people that bankrupts or busts or whatever, but it's a number of people.
Yes.
But then the businesses, right? So if I've borrowed for a van or whatever at X amount and now I have to pay double that, my business might be insolvent. Now, it may be that Phillip Ullmann is just on his own with this. But from what I can see, nobody in politics has taken the slightest bit of notice of this.
Mainly
And he can't be the only person who's noticed.
Mainly because most politicians don't understand anything that he's just said. Not a goddamn thing. And that is the problem.
I remember David Cameron said
just
about
1 second.
10...
I was always taught that, again, you probably know this a little bit better than I will, that politics works in 5-year cycles, the economy works in 7 to 10-year cycles. And because of that gap, that difference, whatever, it's why, you know, for example, Keir Starmer is going to inherit a little bit of a better economy than what we've got now because of how the kind of the lag works. So it is irritating. It's one of the reasons I hate Budget Day. I think it's the most irritating day in politics purely because most people do not know what they're talking about. I am not an economist. I am not an accountant. I am not a businessman. I sit and listen to people like this purely because I need to know what they think, and then what politicians should do is implement what they say because they're on the ground. They're the ones doing the job.
We are relatively privileged in this studio. I think most people would accept who are watching and listening that we're not people who earn an average amount, right? And there's no point pretending that we are. However, you know, the average wage in this country, I think, is something like £34,000. You know, if you are now paying $300 a month in energy, if you're now paying $500 a month in groceries for a family, and then suddenly your mortgage goes up from £700 to £1,400, here's the thing, Philip, that shocks me. Nobody seems to be rich anymore. Everybody seems to be... People have joked about the fact that we've had people phone this show earning 80 grand a year in the south of England who are struggling. You know, I just can't understand how we can make this work.
Well, I would just go as far as saying it's obscene. So we're struggling with cost of living hikes. My own gas and electricity is, even though we're now at 2% inflation, we haven't reversed those massive hikes, and no one's telling you that.
But hang on, inflation's down.
No, I'm sorry, it's growing by
still
less.
a positive.
Sorry, explain that to me.
So effectively, those hikes in costs that occurred haven't reversed. We've not got deflation.
Still 5%.
It's still more than it was then.
So what's happened is inflation was around at 10%. So we got that 10%, and now it's 2%. So it's 2% on the 10%.
It's more. And people know it. So when the Prime Minister says, or anybody says, we've controlled it, it's all messing around with numbers.
Yes, it is.
And this is the big issue. They make it complicated because it gives them power. And what
we can all see it in the shops that we
know it.
We know
Everybody knows it. You go shopping.
But hang on a second. You say they're making it complicated deliberately. How are they making it deliberately complicated?
Because they don't explain the numbers. We discussed this before. Why, if you want to see what the impact on people's ability to spend, get a few people in and look what they're spending on food, compare it to what they spend a year ago, and you'll see the trouble. But they hide behind these numbers that no one understands.
They gaslight people, go, everything's all right.
Yeah, it's all hidden.
You have to remember the old quote, don't you? There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. You know, and that's never been more true.
My favourite quote is Vic Reeves. 87.6% of statistics are made up on the spot.
But there was 1 million people in the high tax band about 10 years ago. Now there's 8 million people been stealth taxed.
The bottom line is they don't trust anybody.
No.
They've lost trust.
They're all the same.
They don't trust, and therefore these debates, they're a waste of time because they're not trusting anybody, because they're not telling the truth. They're not simplifying these complicated matters.
But they're also not conviction politicians, most of them.
They're not answering questions.
But here's the thing that frustrates me. I mean, first of all, I think gaslighting, I hate that phrase, but I understand why people say that, because people can see that they are struggling. People are really having difficulties now, and we're being told, oh no, it's fine, it's all great and whatever. But your point is different. Your point is saying that even if you were the best government in the world, the system that we're operating of, high interest rates, deflating the currency, quantitative easing, bonds, all of it's a nightmare.
Absolutely right. As we've discussed on previous occasions, money, the concept of my money in a piggy bank, which is mine and I control it, gone. It's gone. It's just not there. It's all intertwined in this complex thing which we call a bank account, which no one understands. Yeah. And the bottom line is, if the banks go under, I lose my money.
No, well, hang on a second. I'm asking simple questions because I'm here on behalf of the audience.
Please do.
So, I go and put a tenner in my bank account.
Yes.
What happens to that money is it gets loaned out on mortgages.
Yes.
And mortgages are paid for by the deposits.
Correct. So we call the words deposit because it's propaganda. Because it's not a deposit which I can control. It's actually controlled by the bank. And the simple thing that we need to go back to is real money, which I'm not dependent on these banks abusing it. Because if they go under, I lose my money.
They don't need the £10 to do a loan. They create the money.
They create it
when they do the loan.
And explain that to me.
Yes, literally. They lend money into an existence. So they literally say, there you are, you have £5,000 to spend, you owe me the money. And they can do that. That's the way they do it.
They press a button and the money's created.
Let's just be really clear on that. So I think what happens is I go into a bank and I say, I want to buy a car, it's £10,000, and they get the money out of the safe, admittedly electronically, they get the money out of the safe that Mrs. Miggins has put in and give me the £10,000. Yes. I am completely wrong saying that,
I'm completely and totally wrong. And they want you to think that because they don't want you to know that they're messing around with
so
your money.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
What actually happens?
What happens is they literally lend the money out. It's not there. The money's gone, and it's lent to organisations that are paying in a long time. It's not liquid. It's a long term. So they lend it out to a business for 10 years.
So they just press a button, create money.
They literally press a button, and the reason why this is so dangerous because, as I've said to you, mortgages are in trouble. Businesses are in trouble, but everybody's in trouble because if the banks, which they are insolvent, the whole system implodes and everybody loses their money.
Okay, Philip, I'm going to ask you this question, and maybe this makes me stupid by asking this, but right, imagine the whole economy in Britain was worth £100, say, right? Surely if a bank creates an extra pound, I become 1% poorer by virtue of them just inventing the money.
Definitely, but it's even worse than that because that £1 is actually poured into their pockets of the wealthy, the people with houses, the people with.
It's a reverse taxation for people without assets.
It's actually pouring money into the hands of the wealthy,
and it's lowering the value of money. People with assets are protected, and the people without assets are being taxed in reverse.
Absolutely right. That's the way it is.
They don't realise it.
The whole system, and for some reason this is not being discussed. It's just. We're sitting on a Titanic. And we're rearranging.
About 10 years ago, Cameron said, Pete, do you remember this? About 10 years ago, he said there's going to be another big crash. I can't say, and that all just went quiet. So he was actually openly saying it, but they keep, filling the bucket holes up so it doesn't. Eventually, it's all going to.
They're rolling it all up.
Yeah,
the problem's not being resolved. Yeah, of course.
You said right at the very beginning that the system is collapsing. Is that incompetence, or is it people taking advantage of it for personal gain?
No,
or is it a mixture of both?
No, it's a system that from the beginning was never going to work because it's always been banking fundamentally is a mess.
Yeah.
What we need to because I'm not in control.
Even
of my
with
money.
the gold standard, wasn't that better?
In the case of the gold standard, there was still a bank. The answer is you don't need a bank. Because effectively you can say, look, just think simply that the money is there. It's my money. I don't need the bank. Make just my money. Think about it in gold terms, and it's mine. We're not going to go back to gold but we could have almost think about the money on a spreadsheet. That money is mine. Don't need anyone else involved. Don't mess around.
Like Bitcoin, basically. Well, that's what they want, though.
Well,
No. It is that kind of concept.
Let's just leave it here. Go to the break and come back because there's so much to unpick here. And do you know something? What worries me about this, and what worries me when Philip comes on, is that we think we know what money is, and it's just garbage. More next. Yes, this is the Late Show with Andre Walker and Asher Gould. And we're here with Phillip Ullmann, the thought leader. I don't know whether I find you depressing or whether I like you. They want to call you the money man because you understand what money's all about.
Yeah.
But how are you worried about the future?
So what I'm saying, the central banks know. This is not rocket science. It's relatively simple. So the Bank of England, the European Bank, the Fed know this. What they're planning is what we call a central bank digital currency, which is, in very simple terms, a state bank. So rather than having
lost our freedom at that point.
What happens when you have a state bank is
1984.
Well, hang on a second. I'm going to push back against that. Why is it different to have a central bank digital currency than have a tenner in my wallet in the way that I've got now? That's issued by the Bank of England.
as I say to you, it's this difference between a piggy bank, which is my money. You don't need
They
two
can monitor
parties.
you. They can monitor everything.
Very, very simply, we have to think about a piggy bank. Let's keep it simple. It's my money. In a piggy bank, I don't need anyone else. So think about it. At the moment, they're saying we go from commercial banks. They're going to say, what they're going to say is this: the commercial banks, they've blown it, they've taken risks, and therefore the system's going to implode. Therefore, you need a central bank to do it from the centre, because you can't rely. That's what's going to come soon. You wait.
And what happens then with my bank card? How does it work, Philip?
Well, then the state. There's only one bank, which is the state. You're talking about China. You're talking about Russia. You're talking about that kind of thing. And what are WEF's saying? You won't own anything, control anything. You'll be happy.
But what about when a man like you or Nigel Farage comes out and explains, and everyone believes him that this is a terrible thing? What happens then? What do they do then, the government?
Well, what we need to do is, when that systemic collapse happens, that we have people ready and armed with them. So they say, 1 minute, no, we don't want to do what happened last time, where we bailed out the banks, or even worse, we create a single centralised bank. No, let's go to piggy banks. We don't need two parties. I want my money that I can control it. I don't want a bank to be able to do whatever they want with my money.
And you said let the system collapse last time. I remember let people just have their houses and the debt default.
Correct. It's absolutely right.
But that would be a revolution, because loads of people who don't own houses.
So just to be clear, Ashley, you and I heard this. So for other people, they haven't heard it. So you've said something last time, which I think some people might think is just unbelievable. You said your view in 2008 was to not save the banks, but effectively let everyone default on their mortgage.
Correct.
Explain.
In very simple terms, the problem is that the banks can do what they like and create huge amounts of money, and therefore inflate the prices of everything, stocks and shares.
And they know they never lose.
And therefore, it's too much. The young people can't buy houses, and therefore it's unstable. Therefore, when it collapses, it should never have been created in the first place. So effectively, let it go, and let's go to a system which is a piggy bank type system.
So this is the bit that I found extraordinary, and in a sense, it shocked me. Well, it didn't in a sense shock me. It shocked me. You turn around and you say, right, these sods at the bank have created this money electronically that has massively inflated the cost of houses. People can't afford the houses because they've inflated the cost so much, and so now the banks are struggling because people can't pay back the loans.
Yes.
And your answer is, screw them, don't pay back the loans.
Yes, absolutely right.
And you're then saying, look, the cost of bailing out the banks is the same as the cost of saying, sod it, don't pay your mortgage. And actually, the result of it would be, rather than letting the bankers get away with their larceny, everyone gets their house.
Oh, how beautiful. Absolutely right.
Apart from the people that don't own houses. They'll be at their door with pitchforks.
Everybody.
What do they get?
What we've got to do is they need a house. If you're married and you have children, you need a house, and therefore, if you're renting it, it becomes yours.
But hang on.
Because you need a house.
About the landlord.
No, hang on a second.
The landlord borrowed the money.
Give us a second. Hang on for 1 second here, because look, there is a bit of a problem that people who rent don't get whatever, and I understand.
No, they will.
I understand all that. I understand all this, but this fundamental point, which is, the taxpayer is going to have to bail all this out, right? Who should we bail out? The people who got ripped off with mortgages, or the bankers that are living in 8-bedroom houses with 5 Bentleys on the drive for screwing up our economy? Let's bail out the mortgage holders.
Absolutely right. If you look at historically, when new kings were appointed, the first thing they did was waive debts, because they knew what we've forgotten.
The bankers own the politician. The bankers own the politicians.
A new leader would come and do it would be to actually waive the debts and redistribute property. That's what they would always do.
The bankers are the politicians.
History.
The bankers are the politicians, so that's never going to happen in
well, it will. It will if we can start
collapse.
educating people to know the alternative. It will happen, because democracy will work.
But I remember Pete, 2008. Right now. Let's be clear. I'm not going to be crass, but this is a highly successful business.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. He had 100,000 people working for him. Right. Now, in 2008, I do not remember anybody saying, "Screw the banks, let's pay the mortgages."
Yeah,
because it was just never presented. Because you can't do that.
Some people said let the banks fail.
I do remember let the banks fail,
Yeah.
but the people that were making that argument weren't necessarily the people you really wanted to listen to. They wanted to let the banks fail for a very different reason.
We need to start this conversation well ahead of what's going to happen. So the people are armed. No, there's an alternative here. It's called debt forgiveness. Let's go for that.
Can I just ask you? It's really interesting because you talk about the central bank, and I agree with you. That is coming.
Yeah,
the central bank is coming. I mean, it's already been talked about at the WF. The European Union have already started drafting a lot of this work.
Most countries.
That's a nest of evil, isn't it?
The one thing I find interesting is, and I go back to what I asked you before about, is this being done deliberately so you can create the central bank so that then you have the power to control even more? This is my point about, is it collapsed because of the nature of it, or is it being collapsed by people wanting to build the central bank?
There are some powerful people at the central banks that know exactly what they're doing. If that's the question. There are. And they keep messing it up and getting more and more power. And that's because people are not questioning them. That is absolutely what's happening.
But there's two reasons for that potentially, Philip. So first of all, I do not believe for one second, much as you're a smart guy, much as you are a successful guy, I do not believe for one second that you're the only person who knows this. So I agree with what you're saying.
Absolutely.
But in a central bank, there's two potential reasons why you would be up for this. It could be that you are just a bit of a nasty narcissist, dictator, or you could be sat there going, but banking's screwed anyway. We have to prepare the alternative because these lot, 2008 was a disgrace. It really proved the fact that bankers couldn't run banks.
These guys know about debt forgiveness. They're not mugs. No. They know there's an alternative. So unfortunately, it's not as innocent as you suggested. They know it. And they don't want people to understand the problem, so they've got the power to do whatever they like. And that's what happened in 2008.
But the banks are involved in America, and the government are involved here. They get their people in, so this is all how it really works.
That's the way it works.
Pete, don't ask that question, because what we'll do is we'll go to the break. We're going to keep Philip with us. We're going to keep asking this. I have to say, it is taking me a little bit to get my head round, but we're getting there. And I have to say, this is one of the most important discussions we've ever had. More next. This is Talk. Now, you know what I'm getting in my ear. We have got a new rival to Martin Lewis, right? Let me tell you one thing.
There it is.
Martin Lewis is a bit on his high horse. Okay, so we are joined, of course, by our guest co-host, who's Pete Barnes, who's also my proper co-host on That Was the Woke That Was at 10 o'clock on Saturday nights, and also, going up in the world with people like Kevin O'Sullivan or whatever.
Yeah, I'm becoming the new Russell Quirk. I seem to be everywhere at the moment.
And also getting poached by the other place.
Yes,
and haven't signed an exclusive contract.
Yeah, it's also important that I actually make my debut on Plank of the Week this weekend.
Really?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Chuck Thomas, the producer, has done his usual thing. Got all the same people on every show.
Pretty much.
Well done, Chuck. You really are Mr. Diversity. But we're also joined by Phillip Ullmann. Phillip Ullmann is a successful businessman who's effectively turned his back on a lot of the worst practices of business. And some people have criticised you, obviously, for your previous career. People on the minimum wage walking 18 miles during the shift and whatever. But look, I think it's laudable that you accept that it was wrong. But Pete, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I did, because I want to go back to this point of gaining power. Of the system collapsing, of people exploiting it or using it and deliberately collapsing it. Because we're seeing a lot of conversations in the kind of political space about crypto and how, this is supposed to be the new freed form of it. But from what I understand is that the UK government in particular have tried to crack down on it, making the point of crypto pointless. And I know throughout the European Union there's a big move for it. The Americans have tried to make a move to control it. And I was just wondering, how does crypto really factor into a lot of this? Because it was once seen as a kind of, this is the next big thing. And now it just seems to be, some weirdo in his basement.
Can I dovetail on to that? Because I think there are two questions vis-a-vis crypto. Number one, is it a technology that's useful in future? And I think that is one question. But also, what do we do to curtail the reckless investment in it by people who can't afford it? So those are my two comments.
Okay, let me start by setting the scene with regards to crypto. If you look at the history of it, there's a guy called Satoshi Nakamoto who wrote this paper. I was speaking to a well-known professor, I'm not going to mention his name, who is an expert in Japanese, and he said, Philip, the actual Satoshi Nakamoto stands for the CIA.
It's not a real person.
It is. It's the CIA. This is very, very cleverly done, setting us up for central bank digital currencies. This is not innocent, and it's not the answer, because whilst it is piggy bank type, but it's completely out of control.
I was looking at Bitcoin, right, and one of the things about that I am sure makes it doomed, and other people can disagree with this. So Bitcoin, I don't know if people know, consumes more electricity than Belgium. It does, right, which is an astonishing thought. But anyway, the reason why people pay for all of this algorithms and mathematics and whatever is called mining. So what happens is you hold the ledger, a million different people hold the ledger, but by doing all this complex mathematics, occasionally you are given a Bitcoin, which pays for the electricity, and that's fine. But Bitcoins are limited in their number. Now, people have said to me, seemingly sensible people, I said, well, hang on a second. Why would you pay for all this electricity when there is no longer a reward? They said, well, what we think is the people that hold the Bitcoins will be obliged to pay for the electricity bill. I thought, well, that is just absolute madness. That what you're going to do is you're going to go, well, because I've got 200 grand's worth of Bitcoin, I'm going to spend £1 million a year on the electricity to power all of it. I can't see how it's not doomed, Philip.
It is. It definitely is doomed. There's no question. It just is doomed. But the point that you made is right. The point they've got right is you've got to limit the amount of money in circulation, but not based on some arbitrary mining using.
But mining will stop. Why is it doomed? Because they'll just stop and there'll be 27 million.
Because
Bitcoin
it's not accountable. It's all unaccountable.
So it could all just disappear like
that. No, it's worse than that, because it's not money, and therefore they call it a blockchain. If there's any criminality anywhere in that blockchain, the money is worthless, because it hasn't got the protection of money. Money is protected from fraud. Crypto is not, and therefore it's all going to collapse.
It'll get seized, you mean?
It'll collapse. The whole thing will be seized.
The other problem with Bitcoin, and nobody has successfully dissuaded me about this, I think people will just stop paying the electricity bill. When you are no longer given a reward for doing it, why would you pay the electricity bill? But let me ask you this, Philip.
Can I just explain to you why there's a point that they've got which is right, which is this limiting the amount of money. You've got to stop inflation. You've got to stop the suffering.
Inflation's inevitable, isn't it?
No, it could be zero. It's only there because you produce more and more money. Yeah. Crypto have got that concept, and they're exploiting it. But what I envisage, based on my biblical studies, is you limit the amount of money to the people. So you limit it to the number of people based on age, and that limits. So you do it, but based on people, so it becomes people's money effectively, and therefore the money is there to ensure people's needs are met, and therefore you won't get inflation because it's based on the population.
When someone starts another Bitcoin, another type of Bitcoin, when it gets to
it's not Bitcoin isn't the answer.
So look, here's and I've spent a lot of time with you. We've become quite good mates actually, but here's the issue, isn't it? And this is the thing that is driving me bananas about what you're saying, is this. So, if it costs me £1 to buy this sheet of paper, right, and £1 is a piece of paper, right, with quantitative easing, with the banks creating the money, there is more money there, and therefore my £1 is worth less than it was before. I've done nothing wrong, and this now costs £1.50.
You've been taxed in reverse.
So what the result of that is, when we are talking about families struggling to pay their shopping bill, the reason is that somebody printed all this bloody money and spent it on themselves.
Let me tell you how big. Absolutely right. Yeah. So, as I've explained, the banks literally lend money to existence. That means that they can literally pump up the price of anything. The bank's balance sheets are 5 times GDP. This is crazy numbers. It's just bonkers. And therefore, they can do whatever they like, and they're causing inflation. They're causing huge amounts of suffering. So therefore, you've got banks out of control, doing whatever they like. What's even worse is governments are out of control as well, because what happens is governments, we all know, spend more than they tax. Yeah. How do they make the difference?
Well, they issue these bonds.
Yeah, what's a bond?
They print money.
It's an IOU.
Yeah.
Who buys those IOUs?
Don't know.
We do, wasn't it?
The banks.
The banks do.
The same banks that magic up the money, they buy the IOUs as well.
Sorry. To be clear, when there is a deficit by the British government, they issue a bond, which is paid for by money magicked by a bank that didn't exist the day before.
That's what happens. So this whole concept of the commercial banks doing whatever they like is allowing the government to spend whatever they want without accountability.
And your money in your bank account, 100 grand, is now worth the equivalent of 80 grand.
And more than that, if the loans are bad and explodes, you lose everything because the Financial Services Compensation Scheme hasn't got anywhere near what it needs to pay.
Okay, can I ask you this, right? And maybe once again, this is me being naive. I'm going to explain why I think that a bond is a tax rise. Right. So, if I now imagine I have an economy of £100. And the government then issues a bond for £110 and the bank pays for it by inventing that £10. There's now £110 in the economy, but the economy is still the same size. So that means that my pound in my pocket is worth 90p.
Yeah, absolutely. And your assets have gone, because that money is being poured into the pockets of the people with money.
Yeah, so people with assets.
It's not what you're saying is almost saying it's equally spread. It isn't equally spread. It only hits the people.
Because your houses go up by that 10%.
If you haven't got a house, you've got nothing to go up. Yeah. So it's absolutely outrageous.
Quick one. Yeah. We hear quite a lot about what we call brick and mortar investments. Do you think that is what we're reverting back to that? You know, like it's something physical that we can touch rather than it kind of being as digital as a lot of the investments have become now. You know, like for a long time, it was always like we had gold and, something like you could see it and you could touch it and it was there. Do you think we're moving back to that?
Yeah, and this is the concept of the manna. The manna was physical food that they got every single day. You're right, it's physical, which is real. So what the idea is to make sure that you meet everybody's needs, the real needs, every day. What do people need? Food. What do they need? They need a house to live in. They need clothes, which is physical. You're absolutely right. And we've lost contact with the physical reality.
Yeah, but your house price could halve and the gold price could halve, so you've got less. If you've got a mortgage, you're in negative equity.
If we're saying that the money is magicked into existence, therefore I don't need a debt.
Yeah.
All of this, the debt is enslaving all of us. We're all effectively slaves to debt. We get tied into a job. So I may have the house that my parents had, but I'm doing it together with my wife. We got double the mortgage.
Mortgage is death grip in French. Death grip.
It's a
grip of death.
Absolutely.
But you've used this. You've used this.
Mortgage.
You use this. You use this word today that I've heard you use it before: slave or enslaved or slavery. And I don't want to put words into your mouth. My understanding is that you walked away from the business that you had because you believed that effectively your staff were slaves to an economic system that doesn't matter how hard you work, you're still screwed. And your wider view now is that things like mortgages, financial products are making people run ragged for absolutely nothing.
No, the system enslaves. This is what the kings knew. If you don't forgive debt, things grow and grow and grow, and you enslave the population.
Now you've got 50-year mortgages for people in Japan and stuff like that. You're enslaved. Families are being enslaved.
In America, they've had 30-year mortgages for a long time. That's why we're here. We have 5-year fixes, but they fix it. They fix them for 30 years in America.
Where should we put our money, our listeners, young people, older people, to protect you from all
I can't give financial advice, but I can say what I.
Where are you putting your money?
What are you doing?
I haven't got any money in the bank. Nothing at all, and I put it in gold tracking funds.
Not actual gold.
It's a physical gold equivalent, and therefore there's no counterpart. It's just the gold. Literally, the money.
Is that as safe as physical gold? Because your papers could be what?
You're right, but the trouble with physical gold is you've got to go to.
Someone will bang you on the head and nick it,
and somebody come to your house and steal it.
So it's worth pointing out that obviously Philip has made very clear he's not financially advising people, but I think it is legitimate, given that you have major concerns about money, to say what your alternative is. But hang on a second, a gold tracker fund, what the hell is it and where can I find it?
It's Invesco. It's called an ETF. It's a normal share,
like a unit trust, but tracks gold.
Absolutely right. Yeah. It's a tracker fund that tracks gold. As the gold price goes up, it goes up by the same percentage. Simply,
and it's safe, is it?
It's safe. You don't have to go into the gold to hold the gold in a safe in your house and get held up.
Is it FCA protected to a certain amount?
These are stock exchange stocks. There's 2 or 3 of them. There's umpteen.
Sorry, Pete, I know you're fascinated. Go for it.
I am. No, sorry, because I've done a lot of financial services work in the past, and the thing I want to ask you is
not like that.
No, not like that. I don't smell that good. I don't smell that rich either. But the thing I always find interesting is a lot of young people. We see it in the statistics. Are actually investing quite a lot now. A lot of these what they call challenger banks, things like Monzo, Revolut, and they have a way for people to start investing little bits here and there and all those to kind of ease you into that world.
That's that sort of thing where they go, every time you buy a cup of tea, 10 will go into your investment, and it builds up.
I was just wondering, do you think that's a good thing for young people to get involved in, say, at the ages of like 19, 20, something like that? And because I just don't know, because I don't consider myself an idiot, but I've kept up with most of what you've been saying, but, you know, not everybody can.
The fundamental problem is the idea of putting something aside is great, as long as money is not a disaster in of itself.
So put it in, again, as simply as I can, we have this mess which is called banking, which is, I'm an accountant, it's double entry. No one understands double entry. It's a load of nonsense. No, it's just nonsense.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and so what you've got is something that no one understands. People don't realise that their money is actually being lent to the bank. It's a stitch up. So what I'm saying is you need to, based on Bible analysis, you've got to separate it simply into two things. One thing is cash, which is mine and I can control, and there's no other party in that. The other thing is lending. You do need lending, but it's got to be separate and not incestuously related. It's simply so everyone can understand it. And then the loans are there to ensure that people's needs are met. So what we've got to do is flow and let go. We've got to allow the money to flow around the system quickly. And then if people haven't got, we need to lend them the money, but in such a way that we don't make indebtedness. We build in debt forgiveness so that we have a society without enslavement.
And we don't have any more time, though obviously we're bringing you back. But what you are saying is the sad fact here is that the purpose of house price rises is not to help you, because you still live in the same house your dad did, but now it's worth twice as much, which means there's bigger interest payments to the bankers who are now buying yachts with the money. Anyway, Philip, look, thank you so much for coming in. And I'll tell you something I'm really proud of, that we're looking at money and we're looking at banking on this show, because look, people are pretty busy and people don't necessarily understand every element of it, but I think we're going to get there, Philip, so please do come back, and we really appreciate it. Also, I think in future shows you're going to introduce us to some of your thoughts on the biblical element to it. He wants to go back to traditional values, which he thinks are going to be a much better way of doing it. But I have to say, the fact that your shopping is rising in cost because some idiot is creating money in order to benefit themselves, I find is absolutely despicable. By the way, Phillip Ullmann is also a writer at the Daily Telegraph and has the Manna Journey, which is his website. You can see all sorts of
highly
videos
recommend
now called the Money Man as well. We decided
his articles
in the Telegraph are brilliant.
If you think he's pretty surprising here, his articles are raving.
They really are.
Thank you so much to Phillip Ullmann. Look, loads of people are trying to get in touch with the show, but we've got a couple of slots available.